You open the envelope or the email expecting a number and instead you get a smaller one. Not nothing, not a flat denial, just less than what you were counting on. The first thing you do is read it twice because surely that has to be a mistake. It is not random, not bad luck, and not the company deciding it did not like you that day. Underneath every approved, reduced, or denied claim sits the same quiet system, running the same checklist every time. That system has order. Once you can see it, you stop being surprised by it. This is the hidden pattern behind why claims get cut down, and the checklist points that decide which side of that pattern your claim lands on. Picture an ordinary Tuesday. A car gets rear-ended in a parking lot. Nothing dramatic, just a crumpled bumper and a hard jolt. The driver files a claim that same week, attaches a few photos, and waits. Weeks later, the number that comes back is noticeably lower than the repair estimate from the body shop down the street. Nobody explains that gap in plain language. The letter lists codes and percentages, with a key phrase buried in paragraph 4. That phrase does almost all the work, and almost nobody reads paragraph 4 until after the check already feels too small. Multiply that one fender bender by health claims and home claims, every category where people trust a process they have never seen from the inside. The pattern is always the same shape, a contract written in advance, conditions attached to it, and a claim that either meets those conditions or it does not. Insurance, at its core, is not a guess about how generous a company feels that particular week. It is a contract, evaluated against a checklist, the same way every time it runs. Once you understand that, the whole process stops feeling personal and starts feeling like something you can actually study. So open it up. 3 places to look. 3 categories that quietly decide how a claim turns out. The first is the document itself, the policy you agreed to, usually without reading every page. The second is the proof you build in the minutes and days right after something goes wrong. The third is the paper trail you create while the claim moves through review, the calls, emails, and small confirmations. Get all 3 right, and a claim tends to move the way you expect. Miss one, and a gap starts to open. Start with the policy, because most of the real decision gets made here, long before anything happens to you. Every policy carries a list of things it will not cover, usually labeled exclusions. Exclusions are not hidden in some sneaky way. They are printed, in order, often in a section most people skip on signing day. A homeowner believes their policy covers water damage, full stop, because that is the general idea they remember from signing day. What the page actually says is more specific. Sudden water damage, yes. A slow leak that built up over months, often no. That difference between sudden and gradual is not an opinion. It is written, defined, and applied the same way to every file that crosses that desk. The same shape shows up in auto policies, where driving for a paid delivery app can sit outside personal coverage unless added. It shows up in health coverage too, where a procedure can be technically covered but only with conditions like prior approval or an in-network provider. None of this is unique to one company. It is simply how contracts are built, written to be specific on purpose. So the first checkpoint is simple, even if tedious. Before anything happens, you look at what your policy excludes, not just what it promises. Second checkpoint, waiting periods. Some coverage does not start the day you sign, it starts after a set amount of time has passed. That gap exists so the system is not paying claims the same week someone signs up, specifically because they already knew something was coming. If a loss falls inside that window, the claim is not being judged unfairly. It is being judged against a date agreed to in advance. Third checkpoint, conditions. Some coverage only applies if certain steps happen first, like reporting a theft to police within a set number of days. Skip that step, even by accident, and the condition itself becomes the reason a claim shrinks. None of these checkpoints are secret. They sit in the policy right now, in language that sounds dry but means something specific. This is why the gap between what people expect and what they receive is rarely about dishonesty. It is about a contract nobody fully read at the time it mattered. Now move to the second category, the moments right after the loss, because this is where most real evidence gets built or quietly lost. Picture 2 people with the exact same kitchen fire, the same damage, the same policy. One takes photos before touching anything, keeps the damaged items instead of tossing them, and writes down the exact time it happened. The other cleans up first, out of pure instinct, because that feels like the responsible thing to do. On paper, those 2 claims look completely different, even though the actual loss was nearly identical. The claim with photos and timestamps gives a reviewer something concrete to evaluate against the policy terms. The claim without it relies on memory, a much weaker foundation, through no fault of the person describing it. This is not about being suspicious of your own house fire. A claim gets reviewed against documentation, not against how upset you sounded on the phone. The same logic applies to a car accident, with photos of the scene and both vehicles taken before anything moves. It applies to a break-in, where a list of missing items, ideally with receipts or photos taken beforehand, turns a guess into a record. It applies to a medical claim, where the treatment date, provider name, and billing codes either line up cleanly or create a slowdown. None of this requires a law degree. It requires doing, in that first hour, the few small things that turn a story into a record. So the second checkpoint, in practice, is timing. Photograph it, write it down, and preserve it before it gets cleaned up or repaired. That single habit, done early, changes more outcomes than almost anything that happens later. There is a reason claims reviewers ask for this evidence first. It is not a stalling tactic, it is what the checklist runs against. A policy promises to cover a loss that meets certain conditions, and documentation is the clearest way to show those conditions were met. Without it, even a legitimate claim can look uncertain on paper, and uncertain claims tend to get reduced instead of paid in full. So far, 2 checkpoints. What the policy says before anything happens, and what gets documented in the minutes after it does. Both live almost entirely in your hands, before a single phone call to the insurance company is ever made. The third checkpoint is different, because it lives inside the process itself, in every email, call, and form that follows. That part of the pattern is where most claims quietly drift off track, and it is exactly where the next part of this picks up. The third checkpoint lives inside the process itself, in every call, message, and form that comes after the claim is filed. This is where a well-documented claim can still drift, not because the proof was missing, but because of what gets said while everyone waits. A claims adjuster calls with a few quick questions. The moment feels casual, like clearing up small details over the phone. A driver describes the accident and, out of nerves more than honesty, says something like, "I guess I might have been going a little fast." That phrase was never meant as a confession. It was nervous small talk, filling a silence. But on a logged call, that sentence becomes part of the official record, sitting right next to the actual facts of the case. Months later, that one offhand line can carry more weight than the entire police report, simply because it came from the person who was there. This is not a trick designed to catch people off guard. It is a system that treats every recorded statement as data. The lesson is not to be suspicious of every phone call. It is to stick to facts, plainly stated, every time. If you are not certain about a detail, like speed or timing, say you are not certain, instead of guessing out loud. A guess spoken casually can be recorded as a claim. A confirmed fact holds up the way it is meant to. Whenever it is practical, put the important details in writing. Leaving the only record in a phone call no one else remembers clearly is how small details get lost. Keep a simple log, the date, the time, who you spoke with, and the main point, even just a few lines in a notes app. That habit protects you 2 ways. It gives you your own record, and it shows the company you are organized. Now picture the opposite kind of claim, one that moves cleanly from start to finish without much drama. That person asks for requests in writing when possible, replies quickly when documents are needed, and keeps copies of everything sent and received. None of that guarantees a particular outcome, but it removes friction, the kind that comes from confusion about what was sent, said, or promised. A surprising number of slow claims are not stuck because of fraud. They are stuck because of missing paperwork or a message that never got a reply. Being prompt and organized will not fix a claim that genuinely falls outside the policy, but it removes the avoidable delays layered on top of one that should already be moving. There is another category worth knowing, separate from documentation and communication, and it shows up most often in health insurance. Many procedures require prior authorization, meaning the insurer must approve treatment before it happens, not just review it after. Someone schedules a procedure, assumes coverage because an earlier visit was covered, and learns afterward this one needed approval in advance. The treatment itself may be entirely appropriate. The issue is not the medical decision, it is a missed administrative step defined in the contract. That step often sits with the provider's office as much as the patient, which is why a direct question before any non-emergency procedure matters. A simple call asking, "Is this pre-approved under my plan?" can prevent a harder conversation after the bill arrives. Home insurance carries its own version of this pattern, usually around the size of the payout rather than whether something is covered at all. A homeowner gets repair quotes from a contractor. The number looks nothing like the insurance company's own estimate. That gap is not automatically bad faith on either side. Estimates are built from different assumptions, material costs, and scopes of work. The reasonable next step is to ask for an itemized breakdown so you can see where the 2 numbers diverge. Most policies include some internal process for disputing an amount you believe is too low, instead of simply accepting the first figure offered. That process typically involves a reevaluation, sometimes an independent inspection, and it exists because gaps like this are common, not rare. None of this means every disputed number gets resolved in the policyholder's favor. It means there is a structured path to raise the question. Beyond that internal process, many states offer a path through their own insurance department where consumers can file a complaint if a claim was handled improperly. That option exists as oversight outside the company, and it is worth knowing it is there, even if you never need it. None of this is about assuming the worst going in. It is about knowing the shape of the process before you are standing inside it, reading a letter you do not understand. So bring all 3 checkpoints together. This is the part you can act on, starting today, before anything happens. Checkpoint 1, the policy itself. Once a year, or right after renewal, read the exclusions section, the actual list of what is not covered. Checkpoint 2, the moment something happens. Photograph it, timestamp it, preserve it, before cleanup softens the details. Checkpoint 3, the process. Communicate in writing when you can, keep a simple log of calls, and stick to confirmed facts instead of casual guesses. Add a 4th habit underneath all 3. A review or appeal process generally exists, so a wrong-looking number is a question to ask, not a final word to accept. None of this requires becoming an expert in insurance law, and none of it promises a perfect outcome. What it gives you is something more useful, the ability to recognize whether you are standing on solid ground or a gap you can still close. That fender bender from the start of this video did not have to end with a confusing, smaller number and no explanation. A few photos at the scene, a written summary sent that day, and one quick question about coverage could have closed most of that gap before it opened. The kitchen fire, the break-in, the procedure needing prior approval, the contractor estimate that did not match, all follow the same shape. A contract, written in advance, evidence, built in the moment. A process, navigated with clear communication. 3 places where a claim is either protected or left exposed. You are not meant to memorize every clause of every policy. You are meant to know where to look, and when. The next time a renewal notice shows up, or a policy sits unopened in your inbox, that is the moment to read the exclusions, not after something has already gone wrong. The next time something happens, big or small, that is the moment to reach for your phone and start documenting, before you start cleaning up. And the next time a number on a claim looks smaller than expected, that is not the end of the conversation. It is a question worth asking, calmly and in writing. This was never really about insurance companies being adversaries waiting to catch you out. It was about a system built on contracts, evidence, and process, and the fact that most people walk in without ever seeing how it works. Now you have seen it. The pattern is no longer hidden, and the checklist is no longer a mystery sitting behind paragraph 4. That is the real shift here, not fear, just clarity, the kind that turns a confusing letter into something you can finally read with confidence.